Welcome. You're officially locked into Persuasions of Comfort. I am your host, Naum. I want to give a big shout out to all the listeners out there who've been tuning in since day one. The love and support is 100% greatly appreciated. Let's get it. So this is part 4 of the series that I call The Art of Pivot. If you haven't had a chance, go back and listen to the other episodes. Number 1, what it really means to pivot. Number 2, learning to pivot strategically. The 3rd episode focused on understanding when to pivot. And today, our 4th episode is about why pivoting is essential for growth. Now, growth isn't always about adding more. We often celebrate consistency, but real evolution demands adaptability. And pivoting isn't just something we do when plans fail. It's something we practice as we grow. We can see how the experience of growth and consistency both get a lot of praise. But what doesn't get enough recognition is the moment in between, that quiet space where you realize something is shifting and you have to shift with it. Pivoting isn't a detour. It isn't you losing focus. It's a skill, one that becomes essential the more you begin to evolve. In today's episode, I want to talk about why pivoting matters, why it's necessary for your next level, and why embracing the pivot might be the most strategic thing you do for your life, for your goals, and for your peace. I will be exploring in this episode why it isn't a detour from your path, but an essential part of your development. So the first talking point that I want to cover is growth requires recalibration. Every level of growth demands a new level of awareness. Every new level of awareness requires a different version of yourself. One lesson that I've learned throughout my journey in this life is that sometimes the habits and beliefs or strategies that carried me this far are not going to be the same ones that take me where I'm trying to go next. However, the principles that I applied must stay the same at any level. Think about a GPS. When the route changes, it recalculates. It doesn't panic. It doesn't judge itself. It simply finds a way to readjust. And this is how I see my purpose and how I should be doing the same when life shifts. And to be honest, we don't always do that with our own lives. We hold on to old blueprints, repeating old patterns, and sometimes we're reluctant to change because it worked once or twice or a few times. Staying rigid in a moving world isn't discipline. I call that denial. It's you creating an excuse as to why you should remain the same, but everything around you, everyone around you, should be the ones to change. The truth requires the humility to reassess and the flexibility to adjust. And that realization isn't a setback. It's an invitation to upgrade your awareness. I realized that I don't outgrow my dreams. I simply outgrew the version of myself that once dreamed them. Let me repeat that. You don't outgrow your dreams. You simply outgrow the version of yourself that once dreamed them. So now let's talk about the power of letting go. This is probably a sensitive topic, so hold it together. Every pivot requires a release. It means letting go of what's familiar, even if it once worked, to make room for what's next. And that's hard because our identity often becomes tied to what we've built and who we were when we built it. And because of that, you might find yourself having difficulty stepping into new potential while clinging onto old patterns or old identities that no longer represent you in the best way. And as a result, it is challenging to see opportunities when your perspective is always looking for problems to focus on. Letting go isn't losing. It's creating space for better alignment. It's trusting that if something no longer fits, something better is trying to find you. So most people fear pivot because they fear the unknown. But what if I told you that the unknown is exactly where your future is? Think about that. Learning to let go is not weakness. It's trust. Trust in the process of becoming. All right, let's dive into the third talking point. Pivoting keeps you aligned with purpose. Every pivot reintroduces you to yourself. As your vision evolves, so does the version of you required to carry that vision. The act of pivoting keeps your goals, energy, and values aligned with where you're truly headed, not where you once hoped to be or expected to be. The act of pivoting helps you stay aligned, not with who you were or with what you once wanted, but with the person you're actively becoming. Pivoting is simply you saying, my purpose grew, so I'm going to go ahead and grow with it. My vision has evolved, so I'm going to go ahead and evolve with it. When you find yourself resisting the pivot, what you're actually doing is resisting growth. Because pivoting forces honesty, it forces clarity, and it also forces you to ask questions that you've been avoiding. And usually alignment tends to live on the other side of honest questions. Take it from me. I know a few things. So rather than resist pivot and growth, embrace it. Give life permission to surprise you. You might like it. And if you don't like surprises, I'm not sure what to tell you. Catch me on the next episode. So what am I trying to say here? If anything, the takeaway for this talking point is that pivoting isn't proof that you've changed your mind. It's proof that you're growing into it. All right, story time. So early in my career, when I lived in the Bay Area, working in the office was optional. I could always work from home if I wanted to. However, I like to go to the office mainly so I can connect with my coworkers and also happy hours, right? But also, essentially, I wanted to connect better with leadership. I had a great relationship with the leadership at that position. It was important for me. The relationship that I had with leadership was so solid to the point where they even invited me to their weddings, which was super cool. One particular day, I arrived to the office around lunchtime. Head of engineering was going to lunch. We crossed paths right outside the building. And he said, "Hey, are you just getting in?" I was like, "Nah, I was working on a different floor. I left to go grab some lunch, ran some errands. Now I'm just getting back to the office." And he was like, "All right, cool. See you later." It was at that moment I realized that I needed to pivot. I needed to become an early bird. I was a night owl. So I poured months into strategy, design, and passion, everything I had, setting alarms and placing my phone across the room, just so if the alarm goes off, I am forced to get out of bed to shut it off. But the more this urgency to become an early bird grew, the less connected I felt to it. On paper, it was a success. Why? Because I was tracking the times I woke up. I was tracking my patterns before I went to bed. But in spirit, it was a heavy load to carry. I just remember sitting one night on the edge of my bed asking myself, what am I doing? Why am I doing this? I mean, I built something great, but I just wasn't connected to the big reason why. Once I was able to shift my perspective and understanding the big reason why, I was able to pivot appropriately with a different mindset. As a result, I was able to shift the direction without losing momentum. I was able to recenter on purpose and launch something that reflected who I was becoming and not just something that I could produce at that point in time. And that pivot did wonders for me, even to this day. All those months of discipline and routine has stuck with me 10 years later. I'm still going to bed 9, 10 p.m. on average most nights, and still waking up at 4 a.m. just to start my morning routines. Every lesson, every late night, every almost became fuel for what came next. The pivot didn't just set me back, it set me free. So take a moment and ask yourself, what have you been holding on to that no longer reflects where you're headed? What lessons might be waiting on the other side of a pivot that you've been resisting? And lastly, if growth required you to release something today, would you be willing to trust what comes next? As you answer these questions, just keep in mind that pivoting isn't leaving something behind. It's making space for what you're becoming. And if this episode spoke to you in any way, take a moment to reflect on the areas where growth feels uncomfortable and ask if it's because you've been stretched or because it's time to shift. Next up, I will be talking about the pivot playbook. In this episode, I'll be closing out the series, mapping out how to identify, plan, and execute pivots that align with your next level without losing peace or your progress. Because mastering the pivot means mastering momentum. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I am your host. Till next time, Naum.